Hey there, sports fans. Today I want to talk about Annihilation. I gave this book 4 stars and it is super weird. Annihilation centers around a place called Area X, and this is a place that I guess it sort of developed over time and it was sequestered off by a government entity, or it might be made up of several government entities, and they control like a border that surrounds it, and they control who goes in and out. Nobody lives in Area X to our knowledge, and it is not considered safe. Annihilation is narrated by a biologist who is one of 4 members of the 12th expedition to go into Area X. Their job is just to observe, make notes, take samples, and kind of investigate because it seems like not much is really known about the area. Every other expedition has ended in some sort of tragedy or death. I think none of the members of the other 11 expeditions are surviving. It's a little bit unclear, but I don't think any of them are currently living. Within days or even hours of the 12th expedition entering into Area X, things start to go awry. It gets truly insane. There's a lot of suspicion and confusion and manipulation happening among the small group of women who go into this Area X. There's a lot of mystery in this book. We only see what the biologist can tell us, and she is very disconnected in a way. She's not super personable. She's not interested in other people. She's interested in observing what she feels like observing. And so her diary entries reflect that. She also has kind of ulterior motives for even being here. She didn't come here because she's genuinely interested in Area X. She came because her husband was a member of the 11th expedition, and he returned home, but he returned home kind of changed, and then shortly thereafter died of cancer, along with all of the other living members of the 11th expedition. The writing feels dry at times, but it's not really the writing that's dry, it's the character that's dry. That's her personality. The writing is actually very rich. It's very well written. I really enjoyed reading it, and it was easy to read this very quickly, so I found it satisfying as far as like the quality of the prose, but also an easy to read book. The story itself is incredibly weird. It's so strange. I hesitate to even discuss any of my opinions here at this point in the video because I feel like it would spoil a lot, but I will try to be as spoiler free, and then I will have a spoiler section later. Some of the parts that are actually pretty terrifying are kind of subtle. It sneaks up on you. You don't realize what's happening is actually terrifying until you start to really think about it. If you start to think about that this is a real person experiencing these things, she's trying to tell you what she saw, and it's so insane that she can't even really express it. I saw a review where someone said that this book is like a very strange, weird dream that at any point could turn into a nightmare. And I think that that is such an apt description because it really does feel like a dream, like speculative fiction kind of, but it is constantly on the knife's edge of being absolutely terrifying. So I have a friend who read this before me, and she said that it felt like literary blue balls, like she was constantly waiting for something to happen, and it just never did. And at first I did agree. I felt like I was kind of waiting. I was on the edge of my seat and I was waiting for something to happen, but I wasn't getting that delivered to me until I was describing it to my husband. And this was early on, so I was only a few chapters in. I was describing to my husband the part where the biologist enters the tower for the first time and what she finds there. And as I was telling him about it, I realized how truly like mind-bending and terrifying that really is. So I realized that if you're going into this book and you're expecting an all-out, guns blazing, physically violent, thriller, that's not what you're gonna get. This is much more subtle, it's much more psychological, and it's kind of like quietly terrifying the further that you get into it. I think you have to go into this book accepting that this is the field notes of a biologist who came into Area X just to observe the organisms there. And this is her recording her experience. And if you accept it as just, you happen to find these field notes, it is really insane, and you will feel much more satisfied by those kinds of expectations. An aspect of this book that I think is worth noting is that the biologist might be one of the best unreliable narrators I've ever read, hands down. She is a scientist, but she also seems like she is withholding. She doesn't always feel like she's telling you everything. I don't think she's lying, but it does sometimes feel like she's holding back on a personal level. And so it does make you feel like she's unreliable in that you don't know what she's withholding from you. And I think that it's done really, really well. So now I'd like to go into some of my thoughts in a little bit more detail, and this will include spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, I highly suggest that you do, and then maybe come back and compare my thoughts to your thoughts. Let's compare notes. Let's talk about it. Some of the things I had in my notes were like little questions that didn't really get answered, and I think it's better that they didn't, because we're not getting like a third-party narration. We're getting a first-person narration from a person who was there. So she can't possibly know everything. But some of my questions were like, why do they have to use hypnotic suggestion before they get into Area X? I was so curious about this because it is that the government agency who sends the expeditions trains the team leader, the psychologist, to use trigger words and suggestion to try to control the situation and to force the other expeditioners to do things that they might not want to do, like forcing the anthropologist into the tower tunnel. But it kind of opened like a whole can of worms in my head about why they knew that they would need someone who was able to control the other members of the group and force them into things. And it made me immediately think, how many expeditions have really been here? And I didn't want to put this in the first section of the video because I didn't want to spoil like my thought process. But I was thinking about how some of the expeditions didn't come home at all, but that it's reported that they had in-group violence. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying it, but I thought, how do they know? How does the government agency know what happened if nobody came back? Like, I mean, obviously you can't trust these people. They sent you into a place that they lied about, but it did open up like a bunch of questions in my head. It made it so mysterious. One of my big questions when she starts to talk about the 11th expedition, her husband's expedition, why did they get a medic and this expedition didn't? And in fact, the 11th expedition had 2 medics and the 12th has none. Very strange. And she doesn't seem to question it either. But I was like, we know this place is unsafe. We know that strange things happen here. Shouldn't every team have a medic? Also, the 11th expedition was like 6 guys or 8 guys, but this one was only 4 women. I wasn't sure if that was intentional, like they were trying to experiment with groups of all men, groups of all women, or what, but I did find that interesting. And this might be the only time I say I love having these unanswered questions, because this is a trilogy. Technically there's 4 books, but it was a trilogy first, and then Vandermeer wrote a fourth book. So it is possible that I'll get some answers to these questions, but I might not. I was curious about the significance of the lighthouse. The agency seems concerned with the lighthouse. Like the lighthouse was a goal. That was where they were supposed to go and investigate, but they got waylaid by the tunnel/tower. I was so interested to know about the lighthouse. Like, I really wish that the psychologist hadn't died because I wanted to know everything that she knew. And even she probably didn't even know half of the truth. But I was just so curious to know everything about the lighthouse, everything about like what originated there, what happened there, and who is the lighthouse keeper. The doppelgangers were a huge question. I really like the way that the doppelgangers are done in the book versus the film. I listen, if I'm being honest with you, I hated that movie. I thought it was terrible. I thought the premise was super interesting and that the execution was awful, and I absolutely hated the end. The book I love. I think that the book is great, and I think the doppelgangers in the book are so much better than the doppelgangers in the movie. I just think it's so much scarier because the biologist sees the anthropologist's dead and decaying body being like overtaken by plants and moss and these really strange little organisms. So like the anthropologist is dead. We see her body. And then later when the biologist goes back to base camp, the surveyor says the anthropologist tried to come back, but I took care of her. What? Like that was so weird and scary. And it's when you realize right then and there are doppelgangers here. Something is taking the form of other people. And I'm not sure if they can only take the form of other people after they're dead. It's not addressed. It's just spooky as hell. And I really liked that. So the biologist throughout all of this is really intrigued by the writing, the writing on the wall, the writing on the wall of the tunnel/tower. And she's very intrigued by the crawler and what it is and why it's there. It's referenced by the psychologist that they know, the government entity knows about the crawler. They call it something else. We don't know what they call it. We don't get that much information out of the psychologist before she dies. I wish we would have. So the biologist is like really intrigued, and I thought that maybe the crawler is like a biologist in its own right. Maybe it's just experimenting. People come here, it experiments with them, it pulls information out of them, and then it documents its findings. It was just a thought. I thought it was crazy. It's so weird, but it's so good. I haven't read like any theories or reviews really of this book because I want to get through the trilogy before I take in other people's thoughts and opinions. But one thing that kept coming through my mind was not necessarily a hive mind, but that maybe Area X is almost one organism, and everything inside of Area X is just a part of that one organism. And as you enter into this place, you are like a virus. So like the biologist is like a viral cell that enters into this organism. And so the rest, like everything else there, wants to destroy it and then absorb. And it made me wonder if like that's what Area X is maybe one big organism that just defends itself and then absorbs. At the end, when she finds the mountain of field notes and journals and samples, it I should have known, I should have seen it coming, but I didn't because I was so absorbed in what was happening. But when it's revealed that there have been possibly hundreds of expeditions, it blew my mind. It really did, because I was like, Does nobody care? Like civilians, nobody cares about this place? Nobody cares? How did nobody notice that all of these people went here and then went missing? Like, is it a huge cover up, or does everyone's just not interested? Or maybe nobody has any understanding of like how serious this place is. I thought that was a huge, like, what do they call it? A mic drop or needle drop. And it was very satisfying as like a shock. A big part of me hopes that the biologist set out and actually found her husband, or more likely she just died. I really wanted to see her like live. I wanted to see her reach a goal, but that's not the kind of book that this is. Those are my thoughts on Annihilation. I thought it was great. It's very strange. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so I don't really have other science fiction to compare this to, but I really, really enjoyed this. And I do think that this is an example of like the top of the genre. I gave this 4 stars, and I would recommend it to anybody interested in a really creepy, weird sci-fi.